The wrench slipped from Roy's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He cursed under his breath and wiped the grease from his forehead with the back of his arm. The mining drill he'd been fixing for the past 3 hours still refused to cooperate. Its power core hummed with that particular sound that meant something was about to go very wrong or very right, and he couldn't tell which. Beacon 7 wasn't the kind of place people chose to live. It was the kind of place people ended up when everywhere else had rejected them, or when they wanted to disappear. Roy fell into the second category. He'd left Earth's overcrowded cities behind 5 years ago, trading the constant noise and endless regulations for the quiet emptiness of the outer rim. Here, nobody asked questions about your past. They only cared if you could fix their equipment when it broke down. The repair shop occupied a converted cargo bay on the station's lower ring. Roy had claimed it when he first arrived, back when half the station sat empty, and the previous owners had fled some conflict he still didn't fully understand. Now it was his home, his workshop, and his sanctuary. Spare parts hung from magnetic strips on the walls. Tools scattered across workbenches formed organized chaos that made sense only to him. The air always smelled like metal and ozone, and that particular burnt smell that came from welding in low atmosphere. He picked up the wrench again and adjusted the drill's power coupling. Outside his shop, the station hummed with the sounds of a dozen different species going about their business. Traders haggled in languages he didn't speak. Ship engines fired up in the docking bays. Somewhere distant, an argument broke out and ended just as quickly. Life on the edge of known space moved at its own rhythm. The explosion changed everything. The entire shop shook. Roy dropped the wrench again and stumbled backward as his bay doors buckled inward with a screech of tearing metal. Sparks flew from the damaged doorframe. The environmental seal broke with a hiss, and emergency barriers slammed down to keep the atmosphere from venting into space. Red warning lights bathed everything in bloody illumination. Then silence, just the sound of his own breathing and the faint groan of stressed metal. Roy grabbed a plasma cutter from his workbench. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. He approached the ruined doors carefully, stepping over scattered tools and debris. Through the gap in the twisted metal, he could see something massive blocking the corridor outside. The creature that pushed through the destroyed entrance barely fit. Scales covered its body in overlapping plates that shimmered with colors Roy had no names for. Blue mixed with purple mixed with something that looked like liquid starlight. Wings folded against its sides, each one large enough to use as a sail. Its head resembled the dragons from Earth's old stories, but larger and more terrifying than any myth. 4 legs ended in claws that scraped against the floor, leaving gouges in the reinforced metal. Roy raised the plasma cutter with shaking hands. The dragon ignored him. It carried something cradled against its chest with surprising gentleness. Another dragon, smaller and female if Roy had to guess, her scales flickering like a dying light. Where the male's scales glowed bright and strong, hers pulsed weakly, the light fading with each passing second. The male dragon lowered its mate carefully to the floor and turned to Roy. Its eyes held intelligence and something else. Desperation. When it spoke, the words came out rough and broken, like someone learning a new language from damaged recordings. "You fix broken things, please, she is broken." Roy's mind raced. He'd fixed mining equipment, ship engines, weapons systems, even a malfunctioning food processor last week that nobody else could solve. But a living creature, an alien dragon that probably massed more than his entire shop, that wasn't in his skill set. The female dragon's scales flickered again, dimmer this time. Roy could see wounds along her side, strange burns that didn't look like anything he recognized. The edges of the burns glowed with an unnatural green light that seemed to spread slowly across her body. "I don't know how to help her," Roy said, surprised his voice worked at all. "I fix machines, not people." The male dragon made a sound between a growl and a whimper. It touched its mate's face with one claw, the gesture so tender it made Roy's chest hurt. "She is machine. We are machine, please." Roy knelt beside the dying dragon, keeping the plasma cutter ready but pointing it at the floor. Up close, he could see something he'd missed before. Beneath the scales, patterns of light moved through her body like circuit boards. Not veins carrying blood, but something else entirely. Energy flowing through pathways that looked both organic and technological at the same time. His engineer's mind kicked in despite his fear. He'd seen similar patterns in advanced AI systems, in quantum computers, in the newest generation of hybrid processors that used biological components. Whatever these dragons were, they weren't just flesh and blood. They were something in between. "What happened to her?" Roy asked, already reaching for his diagnostic scanner. The male dragon's voice cracked. "Weapons from the Dominion, she helped refugees, they shot her. The light inside her dies." Roy ran the scanner over the female dragon's body. The readings made no sense at first. Then patterns started to emerge. Nanites. Billions of them, maybe trillions, forming networks throughout her body. They regulated everything from her metabolism to her scale color, and something was killing them. The scanner showed corruption spreading through the nanite colonies like a virus eating through computer code. "How long ago?" Roy asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. The male dragon lowered his head. "I flew here, I heard stories. Humans fix impossible things." Roy looked at the dying dragon, at her mate who refused to leave her side, at his scanner showing systems failing faster than he could track them. Every instinct told him to call station security, to let someone else handle this problem. But he'd left Earth to escape people who only helped when it benefited them. He'd come to the rim to find something different. He stood up and started gathering equipment. "I'll need you to tell me everything about your biology. I've never worked on anything like you before, but broken is broken. If it's nanites, I can maybe figure something out." The male dragon's eyes brightened with hope that hurt to see. "You will help." Roy connected his main diagnostic system to a portable unit and grabbed every scanner he owned. "I'm going to try." Wrench slipped from Roy's hand and clattered against the metal floor. He cursed under his breath and wiped the grease from his forehead with the back of his arm. The mining drill he'd been fixing for the past 3 hours still refused to cooperate. Its power core hummed with that particular sound that meant something was about to go very wrong or very right, and he couldn't tell which. Beacon 7 wasn't the kind of place people chose to live. It was the kind of place people ended up when everywhere else had rejected them, or when they wanted to disappear. Roy fell into the second category. He'd left Earth's overcrowded cities behind 5 years ago, trading the constant noise and endless regulations for the quiet emptiness of the outer rim. Here, nobody asked questions about your past. They only cared if you could fix their equipment when it broke down. The repair shop occupied a converted cargo bay on the station's lower ring. Roy had claimed it when he first arrived, back when half the station sat empty, and the previous owners had fled some conflict he still didn't fully understand. Now it was his home, his workshop, and his sanctuary. Spare parts hung from magnetic strips on the walls. Tools scattered across workbenches formed organized chaos that made sense only to him. The air always smelled like metal and ozone, and that particular burnt smell that came from welding in low atmosphere. He picked up the wrench again and adjusted the drill's power coupling. Outside his shop, the station hummed with the sounds of a dozen different species going about their business. Traders haggled in languages he didn't speak. Ship engines fired up in the docking bays. Somewhere distant, an argument broke out and ended just as quickly. Life on the edge of known space moved at its own rhythm. The explosion changed everything. The entire shop shook. Roy dropped the wrench again and stumbled backward as his bay doors buckled inward with a screech of tearing metal. Sparks flew from the damaged doorframe. The environmental seal broke with a hiss, and emergency barriers slammed down to keep the atmosphere from venting into space. Red warning lights bathed everything in bloody illumination. Then silence, just the sound of his own breathing and the faint groan of stressed metal. Roy grabbed a plasma cutter from his workbench. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. He approached the ruined doors carefully, stepping over scattered tools and debris. Through the gap in the twisted metal, he could see something massive blocking the corridor outside. The creature that pushed through the destroyed entrance barely fit. Scales covered its body in overlapping plates that shimmered with colors Roy had no names for. Blue mixed with purple mixed with something that looked like liquid starlight. Wings folded against its sides, each one large enough to use as a sail. Its head resembled the dragons from Earth's old stories, but larger and more terrifying than any myth. 4 legs ended in claws that scraped against the floor, leaving gouges in the reinforced metal. Roy raised the plasma cutter with shaking hands. The dragon ignored him. It carried something cradled against its chest with surprising gentleness. Another dragon, smaller and female if Roy had to guess, her scales flickering like a dying light. Where the male's scales glowed bright and strong, hers pulsed weakly, the light fading with each passing second. The male dragon lowered its mate carefully to the floor and turned to Roy. Its eyes held intelligence and something else. Desperation. When it spoke, the words came out rough and broken, like someone learning a new language from damaged recordings. "You fix broken things. Please, she is broken." Roy's mind raced. He'd fixed mining equipment, ship engines, weapons systems, even a malfunctioning food processor last week that nobody else could solve. But a living creature, an alien dragon that probably massed more than his entire shop, that wasn't in his skill set. The female dragon's scales flickered again, dimmer this time. Roy could see wounds along her side, strange burns that didn't look like anything he recognized. The edges of the burns glowed with an unnatural green light that seemed to spread slowly across her body. "I don't know how to help her," Roy said, surprised his voice worked at all. "I fix machines, not people." The male dragon made a sound between a growl and a whimper. It touched its mate's face with one claw, the gesture so tender it made Roy's chest hurt. "She is machine. We are machine, please." Roy knelt beside the dying dragon, keeping the plasma cutter ready but pointing it at the floor. Up close, he could see something he'd missed before. Beneath the scales, patterns of light moved through her body like circuit boards. Not veins carrying blood, but something else entirely. Energy flowing through pathways that looked both organic and technological at the same time. His engineer's mind kicked in despite his fear. He'd seen similar patterns in advanced AI systems, in quantum computers, in the newest generation of hybrid processors that used biological components. Whatever these dragons were, they weren't just flesh and blood. They were something in between. "What happened to her?" Roy asked, already reaching for his diagnostic scanner. The male dragon's voice cracked. "Weapons from the Dominion, she helped refugees, they shot her. The light inside her dies." Roy ran the scanner over the female dragon's body. The readings made no sense at first. Then patterns started to emerge. Nanites. Billions of them, maybe trillions, forming networks throughout her body. They regulated everything from her metabolism to her scale color, and something was killing them. The scanner showed corruption spreading through the nanite colonies like a virus eating through computer code. "How long ago?" Roy asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. The male dragon lowered his head. "I flew here, I heard stories. Humans fix impossible things." Roy looked at the dying dragon, at her mate who refused to leave her side, at his scanner showing systems failing faster than he could track them. Every instinct told him to call station security, to let someone else handle this problem. But he'd left Earth to escape people who only helped when it benefited them. He'd come to the rim to find something different. He stood up and started gathering equipment. "I'll need you to tell me everything about your biology. I've never worked on anything like you before, but broken is broken. If it's nanites, I can maybe figure something out." The male dragon's eyes brightened with hope that hurt to see. "You will help." Roy connected his main diagnostic system to a portable unit and grabbed every scanner he owned. "I'm going to try." Roy's hands moved across the diagnostic interface while his mind tried to make sense of readings that shouldn't exist. The female dragon's breathing came shallow and irregular. Each exhale released small puffs of bioluminescent vapor that dissipated in the recycled station air. He'd cleared his largest workbench and helped the male dragon lift her onto it. She weighed less than he expected, her body structure hollow and efficient like a bird's skeleton, but infinitely more complex. "Your name," Roy said without looking up from his scanner. "I should know what to call you." "Karos." The male dragon settled beside the workbench, his massive head level with Roy's shoulder. "She is Lyra. We are scouts for the Drayan people." Roy Bennett, mechanic, he gestured at the shop around them. "Obviously." The scanner revealed more details with each passing second. Lyra's nanites weren't just technology implanted in a biological body. They'd evolved together, dragon and machine becoming one unified system over what must have been millions of years. The nanites regulated her cellular structure, managed her energy production, even controlled the bioluminescence in her scales. Without them, she wasn't just sick. She was fundamentally incomplete. "Tell me about these nanites," Roy said, connecting a secondary scanner to map the corruption spreading through her system. "How do they work normally?" Karos shifted, his scales rippling with colors that Roy was starting to recognize as emotional responses. The darker blues meant worry. The purple undertones suggested pain. "They are part of us, born with us. They keep our bodies strong, heal our wounds, let us fly between stars without ships. You can survive in space, without protection. For a time, the nanites create barriers, recycle our air, protect from radiation." Karos touched Lyra's side gently. "But only when they function. Now they die and she dies with them." Roy pulled up the corruption analysis on his main screen. What he saw made his stomach sink. The Dominion weapon hadn't just damaged the nanites. It had infected them with something that looked like malicious code, a virus designed to spread from nanite to nanite, destroying each colony it touched. He'd seen similar attacks on ship computers, viruses meant to cripple entire fleets by jumping from system to system. "This isn't just a weapon," Roy said quietly. "It's designed to keep killing, to spread. Have you been around other Drayan since she was hit?" Karos's scales flashed bright red the first time Roy had seen that color. Anger. "No, we were alone, mapping routes for refugee ships when Dominion found us." "Good, because if you had been, they'd be infected too." Roy zoomed in on a cluster of corrupted nanites. "This is malware, actual computer code written to destroy biological systems. Whoever made this knew exactly how your species works." The implications hit him like a physical blow. The Dominion hadn't just attacked 2 scouts. They'd tested a weapon that could be used against every Drayan in the galaxy. Maybe against other species too, any that relied on organic technological integration. This was genocide in beta testing. "Can you stop it?" Karos's voice held desperate hope. Roy studied the viral code structure. It was elegant in a horrifying way, designed to replicate and adapt faster than any immune response could counter it. But it had one weakness. It was still just code. And Roy had spent years breaking into secured systems, reverse engineering locked software, and writing patches for equipment that wasn't supposed to be repairable. "Maybe I need to treat this like a corrupted computer system." He started pulling up programming interfaces he'd used on ship AIs. "The nanites communicate with each other through bioelectrical signals, right?" "Yes, like thoughts passing between minds." "Then I can interrupt those thoughts, inject countercode that disrupts the virus before it spreads further." Roy's fingers flew across the holographic keyboard. "It won't be fast. I'll have to purge the infection sector by sector, and I've never done this on a living being before. If I make a mistake—" "She dies anyway," Karos finished. "Please try." Roy connected his diagnostic system directly to Lyra's primary nanite cluster, the concentrated colony near her heart that seemed to control all the others. His interface lit up with thousands of data streams. each one representing a different nanite colony scattered throughout her body. The virus had already infected 40% of them. As he watched, that number ticked up to 41. He wrote the first counterprogram based on his knowledge of antivirus software, adapting it to work with bioelectrical signals instead of traditional computer code. The process felt wrong, like trying to fix a living thing with tools meant for machines. But Caros had been right. Drayan were machines, just machines that happened to be alive. The counterprogram deployed into Lyra's system like a swimmer diving into an ocean. Roy held his breath as it made contact with the first corrupted nanite cluster. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the cluster's signal stabilized. The viral code fragmented and dissolved. One cluster down, thousands to go. "It's working," Roy said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "Slowly, but it's working." Caros made a sound Roy had never heard before, something between a purr and a deep rumble that vibrated through the floor. Relief. "Thank you, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to take hours, maybe longer." Roy pulled up a chair and settled in for a long night. "Tell me about her, about why you risked everything to help refugees." As Caros spoke, his voice soft and filled with love, Roy worked. He learned that Drayan mated for life, their nanite colonies synchronizing in a bond that made them stronger together than apart. He learned that Lyra had insisted on helping the refugee ships even when Caros begged her to stay safe. He learned that they'd been together for 60 years, which was young for Drayan, and that they'd planned to have their first child next season. Every story made Roy work faster. Every detail about Lyra's kindness, her courage, her refusal to let innocent people suffer while she could help, strengthened his resolve. The counter-program purged another cluster, then another. Outside, station night cycle dimmed the corridor lights. Inside Roy's shop, 2 species that had never met before worked together to save a life. The mechanic and the dragon, united by the simple truth that some things were worth fighting for. Lyra's scales brightened just slightly. Her breathing steadied. Roy allowed himself the smallest measure of hope. Dawn arrived with the sound of boots on metal and voices raised in command tones. Roy had been awake for 14 hours straight, his eyes burning from staring at diagnostic screens and his fingers cramping from constant typing. The counter-program had purged 63% of the viral infection. Not enough. Not fast enough. Commander Wells entered through the destroyed bay doors with 4 security officers behind her. She was a tall woman with gray hair cut military short and eyes that had seen too many problems to be surprised by one more. Those eyes swept across the scene, taking in the 2 dragons, the scattered equipment, and Roy's exhausted face in one practiced glance. "Bennett," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "we need to talk." Roy didn't look away from his screen. Another nanite cluster purged, 64%. "Kind of busy, Commander." "I can see that." Wells gestured for her security team to wait outside. They looked relieved to comply, none of them eager to get closer to Caros, who watched them with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. "You want to explain why you're harboring unauthorized aliens and why half of Deering lost atmosphere when they crashed through your doors." "They needed help." "That's not an explanation." Roy finally turned to face her. "She's dying. He brought her here because he heard humans could fix things. I'm fixing her. That's the explanation." Wells pulled up a portable datapad and showed him the screen. Security footage from the corridor outside his shop, timestamped from the previous night. Station sensors detected their arrival. "Protocol says I report all unauthorized entries to Sector Command, especially Drayan entries." "Why especially Drayan?" "Because the Dominion is looking for these 2 specifically." Wells swiped to another screen, showing what looked like a bounty notice. Caros and Lyra's images stared back from the display. They witnessed something they shouldn't have. Help people the Dominion wanted dead. There's a kill order active across 3 sectors. Caros growled low in his throat, the sound making the metal walls vibrate. We saved children, families. The Dominion attacked civilians, and we would not let them die alone. Wells looked at the dragon for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, some wall coming down. I believe you. I've seen what the Dominion does to civilians. That's why I'm here giving you a warning instead of calling it in immediately. What kind of warning? Roy asked. Dominion patrol ship is already en route. Someone on this station sold you out. They'll be here in 16 hours, maybe less. Wells crossed her arms. I'm evacuating all non-essential personnel starting in 2 hours. I can't protect you if you're still here when they arrive. Roy looked at Lyra. Her scales had brightened from dying ember to faint candle flame, but she was far from stable. Moving her now would undo everything he'd accomplished. The shock alone might kill her. I need more time, at least another day to finish the purge and rebuild her nanite network. You don't have a day. Then I'll work faster. Wells shook her head. Bennett, I know you've got this thing about fixing everything broken that comes through your door, but you can't fix a Dominion execution squad. They'll kill these two, kill you for helping them, and probably slag half the station for good measure. So you want me to just let her die, after I've gotten this far? I want you to be smart about this. Wells stepped closer, lowering her voice. Look, I respect what you're doing, but there's a difference between being helpful and being stupid. This crosses that line. Before Roy could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Then perhaps we should help him work faster. A woman stood in the doorway, short and solid with dark skin and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore the universal symbol for medical personnel on her jacket. Roy recognized her from around the station, though they'd never spoken. Dr. Faye Okonkwo, the xenobiologist who ran the small medical center on Sea-Ring. Dr. Okonkwo, Wells said, clearly surprised. This isn't your concern. Isn't it? Faye stepped into the shop, already pulling out her own diagnostic equipment. I heard through the station network that someone was treating a Drayan for bioweapon exposure. That's absolutely my concern. She looked at Roy. You're doing nanoviral purging with mechanical engineering tools. It's working, Roy said defensively. I'm sure it is, but it would work better with actual xenobiological support. Faye connected her scanner to Roy's system without asking permission. Her eyes widened as she saw the treatment progress. This is remarkable. You're treating the nanites like corrupted software. Because that's what they are, living software. Exactly. Faye started typing commands Roy didn't recognize. But they're also organic. They respond to biochemical signals, not just electrical ones. If we combine your counter program with targeted enzyme triggers, we could speed this up significantly. Roy felt hope kindle in his chest. How significantly? Get me 3 more people who know what they're doing, and we could finish this in 6 hours instead of 24. Wells watched them both with an expression Roy couldn't read. Finally, she sighed and pulled out her comm unit. Jackson Rodriguez Chen, I need you in Bennett's shop. Bring your engineering kits. She looked at Roy. You've got 6 hours. After that, I'm pulling everyone out whether you're done or not. 6 hours is enough, Faye said confidently, if we work as a team. Over the next hour, the shop filled with people. Engineers Roy had only nodded to in passing arrived with their tools and expertise. Chen, a quantum systems specialist, helped optimize the counter-program's spread rate. Rodriguez, who normally maintained the station's power grid, figured out how to boost the bioelectrical signals without damaging Lyra's cells. Jackson brought food nobody had time to eat and coffee that Roy drank without tasting. They worked like a machine themselves, each person handling their specialty while Faye coordinated the effort. Roy had spent 5 years on this station keeping mostly to himself, and now these people were risking Dominion retaliation to help him save strangers. Caros watched it all with wonder in his eyes. Why do they help? They do not know us. Roy paused in his typing to look at the dragon. Because you needed help and we could give it. That's how humans work. This is not how most species work. I know, Roy said, turning back to his screen as another cluster purged clean. But we're not most species. Lyra's eyes opened 4 hours into the group effort. One moment she was unconscious. The next she was staring at the ceiling of Roy's shop with eyes that glowed like distant stars. Her scales pulsed with stronger light now, the bioluminescence responding to the restored nanite colonies spreading through her body. Caro's made a sound Roy had never heard before, something between a cry and a song. He pressed his head against Lyra's, and their scales synchronized colors, rippling through blues and purples and that strange starlight shade in perfect harmony. Easy, Faye said, checking her readings. She's stable but not fully recovered. Don't overexert her. Lyra's voice came out rough, like she was learning to speak again. The words were in Drayan, a language of musical tones and harmonic frequencies that Roy's translator struggled to process. Caro's responded in kind, his own voice shaking with emotion. What's she saying? Roy asked. Caro's turned to them and Roy was startled to see moisture in the dragon's eyes. Tears. She asks why strangers would risk themselves for us. I tell her this is what humans do. Tell her she can ask me herself in a minute, Faye said, adjusting her medical scanner. Her translator implant should come back online as the nanites rebuild her neural connections. They worked in silence for another 30 minutes, the team moving with practiced efficiency now that they'd found their rhythm. Chen routed the counter-program through Lyra's secondary neural clusters. Rodriguez balanced the bioelectrical load across her recovering systems. Jackson monitored her vital signs and called out warnings when anything spiked too high or dropped too low. Roy focused on the core programming, writing code that would help Lyra's nanites rebuild themselves once the viral infection was completely purged. He'd never imagined using his engineering skills like this, treating a living being as both patient and machine. But watching Lyra's scales grow brighter with each passing minute, he understood something fundamental. There was no difference between fixing a broken engine and fixing a broken person. Both required skill, patience, and the willingness to try. Lyra spoke again, and this time Roy's translator caught the words. "Thank you," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I do not understand why you help, but thank you." "You don't need to thank us yet," Roy said. "We're not finished. Caro's told me what you are doing, what you risk." Lyra shifted on the workbench, trying to sit up. Faye gently pushed her back down. "The Dominion comes for us. You should run." "We've got 2 hours before Commander Wells pulls everyone out," Roy said. "We'll be done by then." Lyra's eyes found his, and Roy saw intelligence there that matched any human he'd known. "The data. The Dominion takes data from the weapon, from what it did to me. They test it, perfect it." Everyone in the shop stopped working. Faye looked up from her scanner. "What kind of data?" "Everything, how the infection spreads, how fast it kills, what adjustments make it stronger." Lyra's scales flickered with distress. "They transmit it to research stations, use it to create weapons against other species. Hundreds of species with organic technology like ours." "When do they transmit?" Chen asked. "I do not know, days maybe, perhaps hours." Lyra looked at Caro's. "We thought only to survive, to warn our people, but if the data spreads, thousands die, millions." The shop fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the soft sound of Lyra's breathing. Roy's mind raced through the implications. They could save Lyra, get her and Caro's away safely, complete the mission they'd started. But out there somewhere, the Dominion was preparing to use what they'd learned from torturing her to kill countless others. "Where's the data now?" Roy asked. "Relay station, 3 hours flight from here." Caro's voice was heavy. "Automated defenses, small garrison. They do not expect anyone to interfere." Rodriguez whistled low. 3 hours there, 3 hours back. That's cutting it close with the Dominion patrol incoming." "It's worse than that," Jackson said. Someone would have to infiltrate the station, corrupt the data before transmission. That's not a remote job. Someone has to go there. Faye looked between Lyra and the equipment monitoring her recovery. She needs at least 4 more hours of treatment. Moving her before then could cause the viral infection to resurge, and she needs both of us here to manage the recovery process. Roy understood what she wasn't saying. Lyra couldn't go. Faye couldn't go. That left him in Caro's, a mechanic and a dragon going up against a Dominion facility. It was the kind of plan that only worked in stories, and usually not even then. "We finished the treatment," Caro said firmly. "Let the data transmit. Lyra's life matters more than my revenge." "It's not revenge," Roy said quietly. "It's stopping a weapon that could kill millions, including more of your people." "And how do we do that?" Caro's scales flashed red with frustration. "I cannot leave Lyra. Our bond, our nanite colonies are synchronized. If I go too far, both of us become unstable. I will not risk her recovery." Roy looked at his team. Chen, who'd left a high-paying job on Mars to find adventure on the Rim. Rodriguez, who'd fled domestic violence and rebuilt her life fixing power systems. Jackson, who never talked about his past but showed up every day to help whoever needed it. Faye, who could have been a wealthy doctor on Earth but chose to treat anyone who walked through her door regardless of species or ability to pay. "You're all human," Lyra said softly, watching them. "You think like humans, you believe you can save everyone." "Not everyone," Roy said, "but we can try to save as many as possible. That's what mechanics do, we fix things. And right now there's a whole lot broken that needs fixing." He turned to Caro's. "How bad does it get if you separate from Lyra? What's the range before things start failing?" "I do not know. We have never been apart since we bonded." Caro's looked at his mate, and the pain in his eyes was clear. "Perhaps a few kilometers before the strain becomes dangerous." "Then we go together," Roy said, pulling up star charts on his display. "You and me. We infiltrate the relay station, corrupt the data, and get back before your nanites destabilize. Faye and the team finish saving Lyra." "That's suicide," Wells said from the doorway. Nobody had noticed her return. "You're a mechanic, not a soldier." "I'm a mechanic who knows how to break into secured systems." Roy met her eyes. "And I'm not doing this alone." Roy's cargo ship was nothing special. A civilian transport called the Perseverance, 20 years old, with engines that coughed more than they purred and hull plating that had seen better decades. But it flew, and right now that was all that mattered. Caro's barely fit in the cargo bay. He'd folded his wings tight against his body and curled into the smallest configuration possible, but his head still scraped the ceiling when he moved. Through the bay's internal cameras, Roy could see the dragon's scales flickering with colors he was learning to read. Dark blue for pain, purple for worry. Brief flashes of that starlight color when Caro's thought about Lyra. "How are you holding up?" Roy asked through the intercom as he pushed the engines to their maximum safe speed. "My nanites know Lyra is not near. They search for her signal." Caro's voice sounded strained. "It feels like part of me is missing, like breathing with half lungs." "We'll be fast, in and out before your systems get too unstable." "You have done this before, infiltration." Roy laughed without humor. "I've broken into locked systems, computer networks, encrypted databases, never actually broken into a physical military facility." "Then we both attempt something new." A pause. "Roy Bennett, why do you do this? You could have finished healing Lyra and sent us away, been safe." Roy thought about that while he adjusted their course to avoid a debris field. Because being safe isn't the same as being right, and because someone has to stop that data from spreading. That is not an answer, that is a deflection. The dragon was too perceptive. Roy sighed and engaged the autopilot for the next 20 minutes. "I had a brother back on Earth. He got sick with something the doctors said was incurable, neural degradation. I spent 2 years trying to fix him, trying every treatment, every experimental procedure. Nothing worked. He died. Eventually, but before he did, he told me something. He said the trying mattered more than the succeeding, that every attempt to fix the unfixable made the universe a little less broken, even if it didn't save him. Roy's hands tightened on the controls. I came out here to get away from losing him, but I think maybe I came out here to keep trying, to keep fixing things. Carrows was quiet for a long moment. Your brother was wise. He was smarter than me, kinder than me, braver than me. Roy brought up the sensor display showing the relay station ahead. He would have done this without hesitation. The relay station appeared on visual range 30 minutes later. It was small compared to Beacon 7, just a cluster of modules attached to a central communications array. Weapons platforms dotted its exterior, automated defenses designed to handle small threats. A single patrol ship sat docked at the main hub, probably the garrison's transport. I count 6 weapons platforms, Roy said, studying the tactical display. And scanning shows about 12 personnel inside. Could be military, could be technicians. Can we avoid them? Not if we want to reach the data core. Roy pulled up schematics he'd pulled from public databases. The relay station uses standard Dominion architecture. Data core is in the central module, behind 3 security checkpoints. Then we fight through. No, we don't. Roy adjusted the ship's approach vector. We're a civilian cargo vessel. We request docking for emergency repairs. They'll probably let us in because turning away ships in distress is against interstellar law. Once we're inside, I slip away and reach the data core while you keep them distracted. By distracted, you mean I let them see me. A Drayan showing up will definitely get their attention. They'll focus on capturing you instead of checking for stowaways. Carrows rumbled thoughtfully. This plan requires me to be bait. This plan requires you to buy me 10 minutes. Can you do that without getting killed? I'm harder to kill than I look. Roy initiated the docking request. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then a voice crackled over the comms in clipped Dominion standard. Civilian vessel Perseverance, state your emergency. Engine failure in the tertiary coolant system, Roy lied smoothly. Requesting permission to dock for repairs. I've got maybe an hour before total system shutdown. Another pause. Roy held his breath. If they refused, the whole plan collapsed. Permission granted. Dock at Bay 3. Keep your ship powered down and submit to inspection. Understood, thanks for the assist. The docking clamps engaged with a gentle thud. Roy shut down all but essential systems, making the engine failure look legitimate. Through the cargo bay camera, he watched Carrows prepare himself. The Dragon's scales were flickering badly now, the separation from Lyra taking its toll. Remember, Roy said, 10 minutes, that's all I need. And if they try to kill me, don't let them. Lyra would be very upset if I brought you back damaged. Something that might have been laughter rumbled through the intercom. Humans, you joke before battle. It's how we deal with fear. Roy grabbed a maintenance kit and a plasma cutter, tucking both into his jacket. Ready. No, but we proceed anyway. The airlock opened. Roy stepped out first, playing the part of a frustrated civilian pilot. 2 Dominion guards waited in the docking bay, both armed but relaxed. They saw exactly what they expected to see. A human. Alone, no threat. Let me guess, one of them said in bored tones. Another cheap Earth ship falling apart. The engine was fine when I bought it, Roy said, moving toward the corridor. Must have gotten a bad coolant regulator. Station doesn't provide repair services. You can use the bay, but you're on your own. That's fine, I've got tools. The guards waved him through. Roy walked calmly toward the main corridor, counting steps. Behind him, he heard the cargo bay doors open, heard Carrows emerge into the docking bay, heard the exact moment when the guards realized what they were looking at. Shouting, alarms, the thunder of Carrows's roar echoing through the station. Roy ran. not toward the ship but deeper into the facility. The guards didn't notice. They were too busy calling for backup, too focused on the dragon that had just appeared in their docking bay. He had 10 minutes, maybe less. The data core waited somewhere ahead, holding information that would turn Lyra's suffering into a weapon against millions. Roy had never been a hero, never wanted to be, but he'd told Caros the truth. Someone had to try. His brother would have done this, would have run headlong into danger to save people he'd never meet. Roy was just a mechanic, but mechanics fix things, and this needed fixing. The data core looked exactly like Roy expected. Banks of servers stacked floor to ceiling, blinking lights showing active data streams, and a central terminal that controlled everything. What he hadn't expected was how easy it had been to reach. 3 security checkpoints, all abandoned when the guards rushed to deal with Caros. Roy connected his portable system to the main terminal and started working. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, breaking through security protocols he'd seen 100 times before. Dominion encryption was strong but predictable. They relied on complexity over cleverness, which meant someone who understood the underlying architecture could find the patterns. The data appeared on his screen, files upon files of research data from the weapon that had nearly killed Lyra, test results, infection rates, adaptation parameters, everything needed to turn a prototype into a perfected weapon, and scheduled for transmission in 14 minutes. Roy started writing the corruption program. Not just deletion because they'd have backups. He needed to corrupt the data at its core, introduce errors that would cascade through every copy, every backup, every archived version. Make it toxic, make it useless. 7 minutes passed. The virus was halfway complete. Outside in the corridors, Roy heard weapons fire and Caros's roars. The dragon was holding them off, but for how much longer? 9 minutes. The virus was done. Roy hesitated with his finger over the execute command. Once he released this, there was no calling it back. The Dominion would know someone had sabotaged their research. They'd lock down the station. Escape would become much harder. He pressed execute. The servers around him screamed with alert tones. Data streams corrupted in real time, the virus spreading through the system like fire through dry wood. Roy watched the transmission schedule fail, error messages cascading across every screen. 12 years of bioweapon research destroyed in 15 seconds. Then the door exploded inward, and guards poured through. Roy dropped behind a server bank as plasma fire scorched the air where he'd been standing. He pulled out his plasma cutter, a tool not a weapon, and realized how completely outmatched he was. 4 guards in combat armor versus 1 mechanic with a glorified welding torch. "Hands up," one guard shouted. "Step out now." Roy stayed behind the server, mind racing. The data was destroyed, the mission accomplished. All he had to do was survive long enough to get back to the ship. Simple, except for the armed soldiers between him and the door. The ceiling collapsed. Caros crashed through from the level above, his massive body crushing 2 guards under his weight. The other 2 spun to face this new threat, giving Roy the opening he needed. He ran, not toward the door but toward Caros. The dragon's scales were flickering badly now, dark colors dominating the pattern. The separation from Lyra was killing him. "Time to leave," Roy gasped as he reached Caros. "Agreed," Caros's voice sounded weak. "Can you run? Can you fly?" The dragon's answer was to grab Roy with 1 claw and launch through the hole in the ceiling. They crashed through 2 more levels before Caros's wings caught air in an open maintenance shaft. The flight was rough and uncontrolled, nothing like the graceful movements Roy had imagined dragons capable of. Caros was failing, his nanites screaming for Lyra's presence. They reached the docking bay to find it sealed, heavy blast doors blocking their escape. The Perseverance waited on the other side, so close but unreachable. More guards poured in from side corridors, cutting off retreat. Ideas would be welcome, Caro said, setting Roy down. Roy looked at the blast door, at the control panel beside it, at the power conduits running through the walls. His engineer's mind saw connections the soldiers missed. "Can you hit that conduit?" He pointed to a thick cable running along the ceiling. "The power line." "Trust me." Caro's tail whipped out, his scales glowing briefly with stored energy. The tail struck the conduit like a wrecking ball, tearing it free from its housing. Electricity arced through the bay, dancing across metal surfaces. The blast door's magnetic locks failed emergency protocols, forcing it open to prevent people from being trapped during power failure. "Run!" Roy shouted. They crashed through the opening door into the Perseverance. Roy threw himself into the pilot's seat while Caro's collapsed in the cargo bay, his scales almost completely dark now. Roy didn't wait for clearance. He fired the engines and ripped the ship free from the docking clamps, leaving pieces of the airlock behind. Weapons fire chased them into space. The relay station's defense platforms opened up, plasma bolts streaking past the ship's hull. Roy pushed the engines beyond safe limits, coaxing speed from a vessel that had no right to move this fast. The hull plating screamed. Warning alarms filled the cockpit, but they pulled away, the relay station falling behind. "Caro's," Roy called back to the cargo bay. "Status." Silence, then barely audible dying, "Need Lyra." "Hold on, we're 2 hours out." "Do not have 2 hours." Roy looked at his navigation display, at the course plotted back to Beacon 7, at the fuel gauge showing reserves nearly empty. Then he remembered something. The communications array. The same one he'd used to corrupt the data. If Drayan nanites communicated through bioelectrical signals, if the bond between mates was strong enough to cross space. He routed all available power to the communications system and opened a channel to Beacon 7. "Dr. Okonkwo, are you there?" Faye's voice came through, tinged with worry. "Roy, did you succeed?" "Data's corrupted, but Caro's is failing. I need you to put Lyra near a transmitter, now." "What? Why?" "Their nanites communicate. If I can boost the signal, maybe Lyra can reach him across the distance. Maybe it'll be enough to stabilize him until we get back." A pause, then Faye's voice firm and decisive. "Give me 30 seconds." Those seconds felt like hours. Roy kept one eye on the sensors, waiting for Dominion pursuit that would end everything. The other eye stayed on the cargo bay camera, watching Caro's scales fade to almost nothing. Then Lyra's voice filled the ship, transmitted across thousands of kilometers of empty space. She spoke in Drayan, words Roy's translator couldn't catch, but the meaning was clear in every syllable. Love, hope, the promise to wait. Caro's scales brightened. Just a little, just enough. His nanites found the signal, latched onto it, drew strength from the bond that not even distance could break. "It's working," Roy breathed. They flew through space with Lyra's voice as their guide, a dragon's song bridging the void. Roy checked the sensor readouts and saw something that made his heart sink. The Dominion patrol ship that had been heading to Beacon 7 had changed course. They were intercepting the Perseverance. "Faye," Roy said quietly, "we've got incoming if we don't make it back." "You'll make it," Commander Wells cut in, her voice crackling through static. "Because we're coming to get you." Roy's sensors lit up with new contacts. Ships launching from Beacon 7. Not military vessels, but civilian craft, cargo haulers, mining ships, personal transports. Every ship on the station that could fly was burning toward them, forming a wall between the Perseverance and the Dominion patrol. "You risked everything for strangers," Wells said. "Figured we'd return the favor." The Dominion ship faced 24 civilian vessels armed with whatever weapons they could mount. Mining lasers, welding torches. One ship that appeared to be throwing cargo containers at high velocity. None of them were military. None of them were fighters. But all of them had decided that some things mattered more than safety. The Dominion ship turned away. Roy brought the Perseverance into Beacon 7's docking bay with hands that shook from exhaustion and relief. Caro stumbled out to find Lyra waiting, her scales bright and healthy. When they touched, the synchronization was immediate. Colors flowed between them, their nanites singing in harmony. Faye ran a scanner over both dragons and smiled. They're producing antibodies. Their modified nanites are immune to the weapon now. We can synthesize a vaccine. Roy slumped against his ship, watching as his team celebrated. Chen and Rodriguez arguing over technical details. Jackson already planning how to distribute the vaccine. Faye explaining to Caros and Lyra how their suffering had been transformed into protection for millions. Commander Wells approached him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. "You know what you started here, Bennett. A lot of trouble. A movement. These people followed you because you showed them something they'd forgotten. That caring matters, that trying matters." She gestured at the ships returning to dock, at the crowd gathering to welcome them. "The Dominion has weapons, but we've got something better." Roy looked at Caros and Lyra, at Faye treating refugees who'd started arriving within hours of the news spreading, at Jackson organizing supply runs to other stations. "What's that?" "Each other," Wells clapped him on the shoulder. "Welcome to the Resistance, mechanic." Roy started to protest that he wasn't a resistance fighter, just someone who fixed broken things. Then he realized that maybe there was no difference. The galaxy was broken, people were suffering, and he had tools, skills, and friends willing to help. "All right," he said, "let's fix this."